Have you been unleashed?
Unleashed.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to another podcast here with Horizon Advisors Unleashed podcast. Here with our guest, Scott from our office. How's it going today, Scott?
I'm doing well, Ryan. Thanks for having me on. This is actually my first podcast, so really excited to be here.
Yeah, don't be nervous. It's just a conversation. It's just fun, and it's definitely a subject we'll be talking about today. I think is one that you should know quite a bit about for a lot of different reasons. But how'd your weekend go? Do anything fun?
Yeah, it was pretty good. Thanks for asking. I'm a big football fan, so watched the Lions get that win last night in Green Bay. That was pretty exciting.
Yeah, it was a huge game. I mean, they had the weather against them, and they looked dominant. They looked dominant.
Yeah, they really did. So this is probably the best Lions team I've ever seen. So really excited to see where they go.
For anybody that's not a Lions fan, I would say the number one stat in my mind for them right now is that they have more touchdowns than this season than incomplete passes. And when you think about that, it's just crazy. I mean, Goff is just playing so efficient out there. I mean, his guys are catching the ball. I mean, just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's really crazy, and seeing like the adversity that they've had to overcome so far this year, it's really been nothing short of impressive.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be in Detroit. We just we got the Tigers that had a little surge.
Oh, yeah.
Got the Lions doing well. Got some of our college teams doing well.
Yeah.
Just need the Pistons to make a little turnaround. So.
Oh yeah.
But anyways, wanted to bring Scott onto this podcast. He's in his 20s. Why don't you tell him a little about like how you joined us, maybe a little about your history and what you do for the company now?
Yeah, for sure. So, I'm like Ryan said, I'm in my 20s. I'm 23 currently. My story beginning with Horizon is quite interesting, honestly. And I actually emailed Ryan. I called him or cold emailed him, if you will, just out of the blue. I was a sophomore in college at the time. I went to Lawrence Tech University, so somewhat local. And I was really just looking for work. I had no internship experience, no work experience in this industry. And I kind of felt that it's something that I wanted to be a part of. And I really just had that idea. So I just emailed him, and, he didn't need to answer me. I was just randomly reaching out, but he did. And I took an internship here over the summer of my sophomore year, and then just one thing led to another, and now I'm here. I'm out of school. I'm working full time, and
this will be your first full year.
Yeah,
all 12 months since you graduated.
Yeah, actually, we've already had that already. So I graduated in May of 23, and now it's November of 24. So definitely time flies when you have a good time. But yeah, I'm a certified financial planner now as well, so that's a huge accomplishment. I was able to kind of get out of the way earlier. And yeah, I just do a lot of our internal work. So I support our front-end advisors by doing a lot of portfolio analysis, really financial plan analysis as a whole. I do a lot of trading, and then I kind of just help make sure that our advisors can walk into a review meeting and really be as confident as they can and ready as they can to help constantly manage those financial plans and really implement anything that needs to be done.
Yeah, nice. Mm-hmm. Yeah, nicely said. Yeah, you've been here for a number of years now. Mm-hmm. You've seen just probably thousands of scenarios now at this point in your, kind of short career at the end of the day. But with the volume of, work we have in the office, you haven't seen it all yet, but you're probably getting close to it. So, that's kind of why I wanted to bring you on the podcast today. Today we're talking about 9 money moves to make in your 20s. So, a lot of these are, things that, you would typically think of, I would say, definitely things we're talking about in the financial plans. And really, I mean, if you're listening to this and you're in your 20s, the earlier you get started on all this, I know it might not be the most glorious thing to focus on. You might not understand a lot of these things, but the more time you put into it while you're younger and creating these, great habits, I'm telling you, the compound effect over the rest of your life, you certainly would be glad that you had done it. It'll make your life easier. You'll build more wealth that way. So what we'll do is we'll kind of go through these 9 items, that we came up with. This isn't all the things you got to think about, but, given that we have a, 30, 40 minutes to talk, we think this is a great 9 things, things we talk about all the time, and a great place to get started. So, since I have personally spoke about creating an emergency account in length, give me your thoughts, Scott, on maybe what you do personally for yourself and some ideas of, people that are getting started, people that are maybe graduating college and wondering, how they should save their money. What should their priorities be? What do you think about emergency accounts?
Yeah. First, I think it's really like an undervalued and thought of type of investment strategy and type of financial planning. Because it's really important, right? That's kind of supposed to be the money that you rely on if, God forbid, you have, a career loss, meaning you lose your job for whatever reason, or you're making a transition, but you're not working, you don't have that income that you usually have, and you need something to rely on to cover your expenses. Because, we wish they do, but expenses don't go away just because your income goes away. So some of the stuff that I do, I really, as a younger person, I do make sure I fund my Roth IRA. I try and max that. So I don't use that as my emergency fund at all. But right after that, that's where I look at, my financial plan and how I'm managing my assets. So I kind of do a combination of a few things, right? I always make sure I have an adequate amount in my bank account. That's just my checkings or my savings account, either or, not really, invested in any way. So I'm not really getting any type of interest or return on it. But I know for a fact that money is really going to be there if I need it. And I already have like that 3 to 6 months worth of income in there. So I always make sure I have that. And then what I do, I also have an after-tax account that's where I kind of play around a little bit with the investments. I do have a lot of stocks in there. I'm pretty aggressive as I'm younger, but I also right now I am taking advantage of the higher interest rates. We're kind of seeing those rates come down just a little bit, but I do have, I'd say roughly like 30% of my account in a money market right now. And that's not always going to be the case, but I'm just saying like, why not, right? So I'd say the money market and then just having that 3 to 6 months worth of income in my bank account, that provides me a great cushion for an emergency fund in case I ever needed it. So that's kind of what I've been doing.
Yeah, I agree. And everybody's threshold's different. Everybody's situation's different. But I mean, I think, having 3 to 6 months, you could go through a lot of things. You could lose your job for a long time. You could have a really big expense come out of nowhere. And, if you have 3 to 6 months, you'll probably have a pretty adequate amount. We'll hit it on in a little bit, but, sometimes people want to know, what should I prioritize? A lot of people, when they get their first job, the first place they want to start saving is their company 401k. And that's, I get the match. I want to start saving 10% in there, which is all good. Mm. But, I think we should evaluate all these points, to decide where you're going to save the money. Because, the one problem with, a young person saving a majority of their money in their retirement plans, is that money is really not meant to access till you're, retired, or at least beyond 59 and a half. And I've seen just way too many times where, people do save into those accounts, they get into a pickle, and then they're pulling money out of their retirement plan, paying a 10% penalty, paying taxes on it, and to withdraw $1,000, they almost got to take out like $1,500, $1,600 to actually get that money in their hands. So Let's move on to the next point. This one I feel like is a really interesting one. Aligning your spending with what you care about. In today's world, a lot of people spend money in a lot of different ways. Sometimes you spend money on things that you think, may make yourself look better or look cooler, or maybe you're trying to compete with certain people and you're spending money in different ways that might not really align with your core values at the end of the day. So what do you think about this point, aligning your spending with what you care about most?
Yeah, I think it's really important, right? And first, we kind of have things that we want to spend money on, and then there's things that we have to spend money on. So I always try and look at it that way first, like what do I want and what do I need? So I always make sure that my needs are covered first. I will admit I'm a very frugal person with my money. So I will say there's not a ton that I'm spending on just because I want it. But yeah, I think making sure that I'm spending, my funds on what I need first is really important. And then, yeah, I do think it's important if you have, extra cash that you want to do stuff that you don't really need that you want. Yeah, it's like absolutely trying to line it with your values. I say like absolutely, why not? I just think that makes you feel better about yourself as a person. It makes you feel better about your spending habits as a person and just your holistic financial plan overall. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's different for everybody, aligning what you spend on, I guess, if I look back at myself when I was in my 20s, the stuff I cared about the most, I probably shouldn't have cared about them so much. And I probably wasted a lot of money on a lot of, dumb stuff ultimately. But, it was fun, I can say. I enjoyed those things. But looking back at it, sometimes maybe you say, man, what if I would have just done, a few of these things a little bit different? Just something to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, this one right here, our third point to me is like, anytime you're talking about saving money into any type of account, the first thing I would always ask anybody in their 20s, is what kind of debt you have. Do you have student loans? Did you rack up some credit cards? Do you have a high interest loan on a car, or, things of that nature? And taking a look at the debt now, because, ultimately, if you're saving money, and let's say you're earning 5% or 6% on your investment, but you're paying 8%, interest on that debt, does it really make a whole lot of sense? I don't know. I don't think it does. What do you tell your friends about prioritizing debt?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really a great point, right? We do see, especially nowadays with all these high interest rates, debt is really, really expensive, and that interest accumulates so much quicker than people think. So there's a common strategy when it comes to paying down debt, which is simply paying down the higher interest debt first. And that's just what Ryan was saying. It's like we're looking at this 8% debt compared to like a 5% rate of return, on your investments. It's like at the end of the day, you're kind of losing money, and that's not even factoring in inflation. So I definitely think looking at your current cash flow, it's like, yeah, you want to be able to start saving money as soon as you can. Like that's a pretty generic and well-rounded strategy. But if you have high interest debt, it really is going to hurt you a lot more than it's going to help you until or really unless you can start paying that off. So yeah, I generally tell my friends, or really anybody who has high interest debt or just a lot of debt in general, start chopping that down, because the sooner you can get that off your balance sheet, the sooner you can start, pumping up your assets more and really starting to save for retirement.
Yeah. One thing I always think about debt is, look at the interest rate and then look at how much you're actually really paying for that item. So as an example, let's say you were not fortunate and, you had to take student loans out and pay for college yourself. And let's just say, as an example, you racked up $100,000 of student loan debt. I've seen 2, 3, 400,000. 100 is probably pretty low nowadays. Yeah. But, as an example, if you were paying, 8% interest on those loans, and I think right now the range of them, it's all over the place, but I see a lot of 6 to 8. Yep. Let's say you were paying 8% interest and let's say you're only kind of paying the minimum payment, which is kind of like the interest payment, you're going to, pay double for your college, after like 10 years because of that interest cost. And with how expensive college is and maybe questioning, do you even get the value out of your degree? Well, if you're paying 2 times the amount for college, it's probably going to take a lot more time to actually get that value on that. So, sometimes people look at debt as, hey, I can get what I want now. I can afford a payment, but you got to really think long term. If you're making that payment for a really, really long time, and it's not a favorable interest rate, you might want to think twice about that. And really, for me personally, looking back, this is the number one thing. Like, if you have debt and it's a higher interest rate, I do believe in still building some emergency funds so that you don't keep making this problem happen when things go bad. But paying off debt, getting past those payments, and then living a lifestyle as if you still kind of had that debt when you paid it off. So once that debt is paid off, you don't just go turn that, $1,000 a month you're paying on the student loan. You don't just start spending it. Then you can start investing that more for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this one, this fourth point, I'll let you cover this one. That you came up with this. This was a really good idea.
Yeah. Building a solid credit score, that's really important, right? The world runs on credit, whether we like it or not. I always see, and Ryan can say the same, like we always see those people who like to pay for everything in cash, right? It's convenient when you can do it, but the problem is you just can't always do it. Like, are you going to buy a house and just pay all cash? You can't do that realistically. So credit is really important, and the world runs on it, right? So having like a good credit score basically means a bank or a loan officer, whoever, is going to be more likely and more willing to give you the money that you need for whatever you need it for. And the way I think about it is building credit is actually sometimes a lot easier than people think. Like, the way I do it is I have a few credit cards. I don't have one, but I don't have too many either. And I'm constantly using them, and I'm constantly making sure that my payment is paid off 100%, by its due date. I've never had a late payment. I've never paid in short. And that's really all I've done. And my credit score is very good to my knowledge. And it's just kind of doing that and getting in the habit of utilizing the system and using credit on a consistent basis, not just like, putting, gas expenses on it, every other week or something, but putting all your groceries, your food, other expenses consistently, and being able to consistently finance that way and pay it off. It's super important. And that's how you not only build, but maintain good credit.
Yeah, and you got to have the discipline, like Scott was saying, is, if you're spending, you got to have the discipline to have that money in the bank to pay it off too every month. But, there is a lot of good debt out there, up to, about a year ago, you could buy a house and have a 2.5%, a 3%, a 4% interest rate, which, to me, that's worth carrying. Now, if you have a credit card and you're paying a 20% interest rate, you probably don't want to carry that too long. So your credit score, besides being able to get loans, it also will dictate, your interest rate. The better risk you are, typically the lower rates you're going to get. So when you're going out and buying a car, maybe instead of paying 9 or 10% interest rate, maybe you're paying 7 or 8 now. And, each time you do those, 1 or 2% difference on the debt you do decide to take on can make a huge difference.
Yeah, most definitely.
Here is our fifth point. Set your future self up for financial success by investing. So again, kind of rewinding to the beginning of the podcast, a lot of different ways you can save money ultimately. I'd say probably one of the biggest mistakes I see people in their 20s making personally is either A, they're just saving it in a bank account, which is, great because they're saving, but, it's not going to really help them get ahead by earning interest, or B, getting into the job market and kind of, I hate using the word of over saving, but, maybe putting too much money, into their retirement plan, and maybe in the wrong section of the retirement plan. Because, most people, if you have a company sponsored 401k plan, you might have options. You're definitely going to have options now. You'll have a Roth option. You'll have a pre-tax option. So, again, when you're starting off your career, maybe you're making the least amount of money, you ever will, which account should you fund? I mean, what are you telling your 20-year-old friends?
Yeah, for sure. And it really depends on the situation, right? Like you said, if your annual income's a lot lower, it might make sense. In fact, I do think it would usually make sense to, on top of having like an emergency fund, start looking towards that Roth account, whether it's a Roth IRA or if, like Ryan said, your retirement plan, if it's a 401k, 403b, 457, whatever it may be, though you're starting to see a lot more of those have Roth options. So I really like Roth. I'm a younger guy, so I can just take that risk because I know I have my whole working career ahead of me. So I'm really funding as much Roth as I can right now. But it's good to have a balance. I've heard Ryan say it. I've heard Andrew and Alex say it. And I agree 100%. Having a balance of Roth, pre-tax, and then after-tax, because they're all a little bit different in some ways, whether it be liquidity and like having easy access to it or how it's taxed, right? If it's pre-tax, you get a lowered your tax liability for this year, but then you have to pay income tax on that when you take it out. If it's Roth, it's simply the opposite. And then if it's after tax, you're looking at a whole separate tax system, which is capital gains. So we always talk about like diversifying our holdings through our investments, but you can also do that with like the types of investment accounts that you have, right? So I think it kind of just adds another layer of protection. So not only are you saving and doing what you're supposed to do and save for your retirement, but you're also kind of protecting yourself by spreading out some assets here. Here's my Roth, here's my pre-tax, here's my after-tax. Now I'm retired, I can pull from this, and this, or whatever I want. So I kind of like the idea of having flexibility and creating that for yourself, because you never know what taxes are going to be like, and you're never going to know like when you could benefit from this money compared to this money.
Yeah, and when it comes to investing, when you're younger, sometimes, when you get a really good rate of return on your investments, maybe it doesn't feel like you're actually getting it. So as an example, let's say you have $10,000 in an investment account, and you earn a 10% rate of return, for the year. That means you made $1,000. And some people, and I've seen it happen all the time. Oh, I only made $1,000. I put 10,000 in it. Really, that's a good rate of return. 10%. I'd take it all day long, Yeah. And if you consistently do that, those numbers compound greater and greater. But when your balance is smaller, when you do get those good rate of returns, sometimes it just might feel like investing is not working for you. And you really got to look at not so much how the account is growing, but also the rate of return you're getting. Because if you can keep achieving that long term, you can do a lot of damage. So as an example, in your 20s, let's say over your 20s, just for easy math, you could save 50 grand into an investment by the time you're kind of getting to your 30s. You have your 30s, you have your 40s, you have your 50s. So if you could double that 50 grand every 10 years, which is pretty reasonable, that 50 now turns into 100. That 100 then turns into 200. That 200 then turns into 400. So that $50,000 that you saved, even if you didn't put any more money into it, you just got a good compound rate of return over time and were able to double your money every 10 years, that 50,000 turns into 400,000. So then if you think about, future savings on top of that, the compound growth can be super strong.
Most definitely. Yeah.
I mean, we'll spend a little time. We came up with this idea, safeguard your online brand and data. I think there's always a big importance on, keeping your data, private. What I'm seeing a lot online is, a lot of people that reach out to me and they want to help, they always want help with my personal brand. This is what I do. I help business owners with their personal brand. And, at first when I started getting those solicitations, I thought, it's kind of weird. And then the more and more I thought about it, especially, if you're a younger, career-minded, type of person, you're working for a corporation and you need to, do a lot of things to kind of move up to the next promotion, next promotion, next promotion. Keeping your brand, and specifically online, pretty important. I know you've been working a little on this. What platform have you been using for this?
Yeah. I mean, for sure. Definitely take advantage of, your social media tools, as a lot of them are free, assuming you're posting, appropriate content and doing stuff the right way. Myself and Ryan, we've been using LinkedIn a lot more. It's a great social media platform for businesses and really anybody. So I've actually had a LinkedIn profile and account for, I don't even know how long, like 6-7 years maybe. I think I had like an assignment in college where I had to make one. Then I just never touched it after that. But just this past year, I really took a look at it. I rejuvenated my profile. I added it. I finished it. And not only that, but I've started to engage with my peers' posts. I see what they're posting. I comment. I like that stuff, and I've been posting my own content as well, because it really does. It's about building a brand and kind of taking advantage of the free resources at your disposal to kind of get your name out there. So yeah, I've been doing that, and we've been able to grow our practice doing that a lot more, just being a lot more engaged with the social media community, doing things responsibly, of course, respectfully, posting accurate stuff. Of course, we have to know what we're talking about. We can't just post stuff and have it be completely inaccurate, because that's counterproductive.
Hey, how come the politicians get to do that?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. I wish I had an answer for you. But yeah, using LinkedIn, it's a great resource. But once again, we want to emphasize, especially as financial planners, there are a lot of restrictions. So we never give direct advice. We try to be informal and just talk about a topic that we enjoy. But yeah, we hope stuff like that helps the public and people who see it.
Yeah. Okay, point number 7 here. Make sure you're covered for different scenarios. I'll handle this. This point. Yeah, I mean, life is never really in a straight line. Meaning, stuff always happens. Crap happens. And you want to be prepared for it in a lot of different ways. The first thing, if you're in 20s, maybe you have a car, maybe you have an apartment, maybe you've bought a house. Any of your assets, you want to make sure you have, the right, insurance protection for that. I probably see the biggest one. I mean, normally if you have a car and you finance it, you have to have insurance. So, that's kind of a given. But a lot of people that rent, do not carry any type of renter's insurance. And, if that building has a flood and ruins all your crap inside, that's kind of on you if you don't have insurance. So kind of taking a look at that. I'd say another thing outside of insurance, you can look at the different types of insurance, disability, life, all those different kinds. But one other thing, for different scenarios, if I could give advice to myself as a 20-year-old or any 20-year-old, would be, to make sure as you're building your income, you don't build your lifestyle right behind it. Because, if every time you get a raise, you're just spending more money, maybe you'll have some nicer stuff. Maybe you'll have, that vacation you always wanted to do, but your cash flow never really changes, right? So you make more, you spend more, you're not really ever putting yourself in that much of a better position. So, especially if you're in a corporate scenario where you can't control whether you have a job or not, you want to make sure that you're living below your means and, keeping enough cash, keeping things, set up properly so that if, by some reason you're just part of a big layoff, you're not just getting crushed in that process. So, Just kind of look at things, the what if type things, what if this happened? What if that happened? If you feel like you're adequately set up for that, great. But one thing I'll tell you is it never just goes exactly, how you want it to. That's one thing I've learned in my life.
Yeah.
Okay, Scott, give me number 8.
Yeah, so number 8, considering planning for home ownership, but don't feel pressure to rush into it. So this is really like a much bigger conversation where people can kind of see it going both ways than it used to be, I feel like. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're looking at prices today, right? Like rent has skyrocketed, of course. That's of course, everybody knows that's an issue, but same with home prices, right? And we see the high interest rates. So having a mortgage, that's more expensive. And that's kind of what we are talking about earlier with good debt versus bad debt, like a 2 to 3% rate on a mortgage. That would be pretty good, but we just don't see that right now. And hopefully we do again. So it's a really big decision. I kind of look at it 2 ways, right? Like one from like a cash flow perspective. Usually even with rent being high, I feel like you could spend a little bit less if you rent than if you buy, because if you buy, you're going to have a mortgage. There might be like HOA depending on where you live. You'll have property taxes. And then the scary thing too is if like something happens to your house or like you have a refrigerator and that stops working, that's on you. Like that's tough luck. You got to pay for that and get that fixed. And if you're renting, usually like the renter or the landlord, whoever, they would, cover that somehow. So I think from a cash flow standpoint, it's always kind of been the same where it's like renting is going to be a little bit cheaper. But then you look at it the other way, right? Like if you're owning something or if you're buying, you at least get the asset. It's like, yeah, your cash flow is going to be more strained. But if you want it to sell or move or something, you can sell the property and you're going to have some amount of equity in there that you get to keep.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. If all goes according to plan, you do. But renting, you don't get that. It's just when you look at it, you're spending a little bit less, but you're just sinking cash flow into something where you really get nothing out of it in return in the back end. So it's really, I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer. It's very like perspective and situationally based for like which one you want to choose. But it's definitely a good question now that we're seeing prices and interest rates a lot higher. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with those points. I mean, the main thing is the maintenance. It's, a lot of these young people in their 20s, I mean, they don't even know how to use a screwdriver. So if that's you, probably buying a house is not a great idea because stuff is always breaking. I happen to be very handy and I can take care of a lot of the stuff myself. But if you don't know how to, then you're going to be constantly bringing in services, taking care of your yard, taking care of this, taking care of that. That just really add up, in costs that a lot of people don't really think about. So, and the one thing I would say is I think, personally, that you can get lucky, you can buy a house, perfect timing, and maybe flip it, but I kind of look at a house more as a long-term investment. So if you're not 100% sure on where you want to be planted, for work or, who you're going to be marrying or a lot of those different things that you might start deciding in the 20s, it might just be easier and better to rent until you start solidifying those things. Because the worst thing that you could do, is buy a house and then have to sell it in the short term. There's a lot of cost, in moving. There's a lot of costs, with real estate fees, and there's a lot of cost on that transaction altogether. So if you're in there for a short time, unless the market really, rewards you, you might end up going negative. And, where I see it a lot of times is people will job hop and, they'll jump to another company and maybe have to go work in another state. And if you're constantly, having to worry about selling a house or dealing with that, might change some of those decisions you make. So
yeah,
I kind of, if I was in my 20s again, I want to stay flexible. That's kind of what I did until I knew what I wanted ultimately.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then our last point, I think, this is something I'll let you start off. I'll kind of just give the point. This is probably, one of the better places to invest money. Everybody wants to go to the stock market or do these different things. I think when you're young in your career, one of the best things you can invest money in is yourself, because by investing in yourself, education, skills, all those different things, those set you up typically, to be able to put yourself in a position to maybe make more, long term. So the sooner you can kind of, get ahead of that, the better. What are some of the ways you've invested into yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing about me, for those of you who don't know, I will say right off the bat, I am not a genius by any means necessary. But one thing that I feel that I'm good at is having drive and ambition to better myself or really do whatever it is I want to do. So one of the ways that I do that is, I know we were just talking about it, but LinkedIn, right? That's a great source to network and meet people, because I always have this philosophy that I always make sure is sitting in the back of my head. It's, you never know when you can help somebody, and you never know when somebody can help you. You could meet somebody and have like a 5-minute phone call or conversation with them and think, wow, this was cool to meet them, but I'm never talking to this person again because I'm going to have no reason to. Then 30 years down the line, they could pop back up and you could benefit from them, or they could benefit from you. So I think networking and really like getting in front of and building relationships with the right people. They don't necessarily need to be, super successful people or geniuses of their own, but just the right people for you. I think that's just a highly underutilized, free. It's not even a skill. It's just either you do it or you don't. Either you have the ambition to go out and introduce yourself to people, or you don't, right?
Invest in your network.
Yeah, exactly. So networking is huge. I really think at the end of the day. Yeah, and I've been trying to just get in front of as many people as I can, because like I said, you just never know. And I think that's one of the best tools you can do to invest in yourself.
Okay. And then I know you invested in yourself, with your education too. And, you didn't just stop with your bachelor's degree. You went on to, get your CFP. I mean, tell us a little about what that investment was. I mean, there's money, there's time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I won't even start there. One of the things that I was able to do was I was able to get all of my FINRA licensing and registration exams needed to just do this job in general. I got all of those done with the whole semester left in college, which is, very premature, not very common, if at all. And that allowed me to take that next step. Like Ryan said, I didn't stop. I knew I wanted to do the CFP. I knew it was going to be hard, but I knew it was going to make me that much better and really the best that I could be. So I took that time, that whole second semester of school, and I started studying. I was getting classes done. I was working for these guys part-time, and then I was studying for the CFP. And I'll admit, it's like I studied a ton. Like I probably studied 200 to 250 hours, and I took that exam and I failed it. And I studied for it the wrong way. I hold myself accountable. But I knew the job wasn't done, and I knew I gained a lot of knowledge from it. But I know that actually having the designation does, in my opinion, make me better. So I was very rattled. He knows this, right when I failed. But the very next day, I knew I wanted to take it again. I knew I was going to get the job done right the second time. And that's what happened. And now I'm a 23-year-old, and I really passed when I was 22. And now I have, in my eyes, one of the most prestigious designations you can have. And it's not going to leave my side. I have that for the rest of my career.
And he has the knowledge. So, I mean, being able to be young and being smart about money, I mean, even if you're doing this stuff yourself and you invest in taking some courses, or you invest some time in sitting down with a financial advisor and seeing, what this is all about. I mean, if you do that in your young 20s rather than in your 30s, you're going to probably be further ahead than most of your friends, down the road ultimately.
For sure. And that was another thing I was going to say. On top of the networking, it's like finding ways to just better yourself as a person, whether that's through knowledge or skill. Whatever it is, it's like pick up a book and read something. You're going to learn something from it. And just the more you can absorb, the better, I think. And just one thing that I like to do is if it's something I'm interested in, I'm usually pretty good about asking questions, because I feel like I learn a lot better that way. So I try and be a sponge when it's something I'm interested in and don't know a ton about it. I ask a lot of questions, and then I get the answers and information that I'm looking for.
Yeah. Well, these were These were all great points. I appreciate you helping out here, Scott, and jumping on it. Yeah, I guess, as a conclusion, with these 9 points, the one other thing I would kind of think about, would be, when you're looking at the group of people you surround yourself, you're investing time into these people, and kind of looking at, who do I spend the time with? Are these people, building me up? Are they keeping me focused on the right things? Or are these people, questioning why I'm doing things, or maybe why I'm not going out, to the bar one night because I have another priority, that's more important. I think, re-looking at, the people you surround yourself with. You don't need to have these huge networks of people that you stay close with, looking at those people and making sure that, you're not always the smartest guy in the room, that maybe you're not the smartest guy in the room, and you're surrounding yourself with people that, are much smarter, more advanced than you, because, when you do that, when you surround yourself with the right people, typically it's going to, result and rub off on you and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, for sure. I think that's very well said, and I agree.
Okay. Well, great, Scott. It's great to do this podcast, and we'll be doing another one soon.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Yep, thanks.
Ryan Kuss, President and Financial Planner. Alexander Dinzer, Managing Director and Financial Planner. Andrew Henricks, Financial Planner. Securities and advisory services offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA/SIPC, a broker-dealer and registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Tax planning services offered by Horizon Advisors. Tax and accounting services provided by Horizon Advisors CPA. Cetera Advisor Networks does not provide tax nor accounting services. For a comprehensive review of your personal situation, always consult with a tax or legal advisor. Neither Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, nor any of its representatives may give legal or tax advice. The views stated in this podcast are not necessarily the opinion of Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities. Due to volatility within the markets, opinions are subject to change without notice. Information is based on sources believed to be reliable. However, their accuracy or completeness cannot be guaranteed. Past performance does not guarantee future results. Investors cannot invest directly in indexes. The performance of any index is not indicative of the performance of any investment and does not take into account the effects of inflation and the fees and expenses associated with investing. A diversified portfolio does not assure a profit or protect against loss in a declining market. All investing involves risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will be successful. Distributions from traditional IRAs and employer-sponsored retirement plans are taxed as ordinary income and, if taken prior to reaching age 59.5, may be subject to an additional 10% IRS tax penalty. Converting from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA is a taxable event. A Roth IRA offers tax-free withdrawals on taxable contributions. To qualify for the tax-free and penalty-free withdrawal of earnings, a Roth IRA must be in place for at least 5 tax years, and the distribution must take place after age 59.5 or due to death, disability, or a first-time home purchase, up to a $10,000 lifetime maximum. Depending on state law, Roth IRA distributions may be subject to state taxes. Investing in mutual funds is subject to risk and loss of principal. There is no assurance or certainty that any investment strategy will be successful in meeting its objectives. Exchange-traded fund and mutual funds are sold by prospectus only. Investors should consider the investment objectives, risks, and charges and expenses of the mutual fund or ETF carefully before investing. The prospectus contains this and other information about the product. Contact Alexander Dinzer at 5455 Corporate Drive, Suite 306, Troy, Michigan, 48098 or 248-265 6662 to obtain a prospectus, which should be read carefully before investing or sending money. Horizon Advisors, 5455 Corporate Drive, Suite 306, Michigan, 48098.